Prey is a game that I know a lot of people have been looking forward to, so before I rip into it, I want to make one thing clear. I don't think this is a bad game. Sloppy? Yes. The antithesis of subtle design? You betcha. But there is a decent game here. It's just buried under some really poor design choices. That said, let's dive in. Prey was originally a game made by Human Head Studios right here in good old Madison, Wisconsin, and it's a game that I know I played when it first came out, but honestly I can't remember a damn thing about it because it's been so long. Jumping ahead and skipping past the controversy surrounding Prey 2's troubled and eventually cancelled development that ended in Bethesda acquiring the rights to the series, and this sequel, now turned reboot, comes to us from developer Arcane Studios, known primarily for the Dishonored series. In the game you play as Morgan Yu, one of the lead scientists aboard a space station called Talos 1. After an outbreak of alien creatures known as the Typhon wrecks up the station, our hero, or heroine, depending on which you chose, is forced into action. Guided by the mysterious voice of an AI unit named January and having only a vague sense of what to do from a recording of yourself created just before your memory was wiped, you embark on a mission to destroy the entire station to prevent the alien presence from reaching Earth. The game takes place a few decades into the future, with the primary research aboard the station revolving around the development of devices called neuromods, which can be used to reconfigure one's neural network within the brain in order to learn new skills and abilities thought impossible by humans. At the center of this neuromod research is the Typhon, alien beings who possess psychic powers that have been used as lab rats in order to pass these skills on to humans. These guys take on many forms, ranging from the smaller mimics to the phantoms that remind me of a cross between the Chozo ghosts of Metroid Prime and the molded from Resident Evil 7, as well as other creatures much larger and deadlier. Overall, enemy variety isn't that great, but the game does a decent job with enemy placement and doesn't overuse individual enemy types, so even though I found myself bored at the sight of these amorphous black masses, I didn't have a problem fighting them over and over. Except for the mimics, which are a very cool concept that wasn't executed very well. Mimics, as their name implies, take the form of objects within the environment and can jump out at you at any time or lie in wait until you walk by or attempt to pick them up. I'll admit the first few times I encountered these guys I jumped a little bit, but once you've seen one mimic turn into a coffee mug or a beer cooler, you've seen them all. I imagine the goal was to place them with such frequency that the player would naturally start to question every object as if it were a gooey black tetrapus, but because they always seem to change form the instant I come across the object they're mimicking, there isn't any time for me to question anything, and instead I just end up firing until the black mass stops moving. And believe me, that is easier said than done. These little guys move way too fast and are damn near impossible to hit with any amount of precision. They don't do very much damage, but they often come in multiples, and as a group they can peck you down to low health in seconds. And I found them to be so annoying after a while that I started hoping I'd run into a more powerful enemy instead, if only so I'd have an easier target. I do get the sense that much of this was intentional and that keeping the player in a state of disempowerment was the goal. This combined with the way in which the levels are designed and the disadvantages the player has means that much of your time will be spent hiding or attempting to sneak past an enemy, and at least for the first few hours this is really your only viable means of moving about the station safely. And because of this I really do feel like a survivor trying my damnedest just to make it past an enemy and live until the next encounter, and taking into consideration the mysteries surrounding the research facility and whiffs of an organically lived-in world, it becomes clear that Prey does a fantastic job with its world building. Arcane Studios is also damn good at designing levels with multiple paths to traverse, and the world of Prey is no exception. To begin with, this game really has a brilliant look to it, so long as you don't pay too close attention to the character models. Ugh. The branching hallways and office building aesthetic of Talos 1 in particular has a striking ultra-modern meets Art Deco look that blends seamlessly into the layout of each level. Side rooms and maintenance shafts requiring some thought or specific skill to enter are built believably into each level's design, meaning you always have a route to take that best suits your individual playstyle in a manner similar to that of Dishonored. Talos 1 is somewhat hub-based with several large areas connected through elevator shafts and maintenance wards, though not all of these are accessible from the beginning. Due to lockdowns, hull breaches, and the occasional more sinister machinations, you'll almost always have to take the off-beaten path just to get to the next objective, giving the game a sort of Metroidvania style of level design most reminiscent of Metroid Fusion. Which sounds pretty awesome in theory, as not many games these days, outside of Dark Souls, go for this style of level interconnectivity, but unfortunately Prey drops the ball pretty hard in this regard. For one thing, nothing is straightforward in this game. Early on there's a mission where you have to travel from your office to deep storage, which is past the Arboretum. In the lobby there's an elevator that will take you directly there, but oh no, it's not working. As per January's instructions, you'll have to take the long way around and go through the guts of the station, which can be accessed through a ward called Psychotronics. Once you finally reach the Arboretum and deep storage, you'll find it's locked down tight with a contrived voice recognition system which you must spoof by creating a digital representation from various voice logs of the woman who locked the door, which can be found scattered about the crew's quarters. And why was I going to deep storage again? Seriously, from the moment I received the objective from January to the moment I obtained the MacGuffin in deep storage, about 5 hours had passed, and several times I had to pull open the Objectives tab in my menu to remind myself exactly what I was trying to accomplish. This wouldn't have been such a big deal, except for the fact that each room you enter also has this not-so-straightforward approach to it. Oftentimes you'll enter a room with the goal of just passing through, only to find that the exit door is locked, or jammed, or whatever, and you end up having to search the room to find an alternate path. This leads to a stop-and-go progression to the entire game, ruining any sense of flow or immersion, leading to a game that feels far too slow and tedious than it should be. In fact, by the halfway point of the game, I was so used to this choppy design that I found myself rushing through areas knowing, and rightly so I might add, that I'd just be wandering around this room in search of a vent or key card or whatever anyway, so why even bother taking it slow the first time through? The game had this programmed into my head so well that at one point there actually was a straightforward method to proceed, and I completely overlooked it. There was a locked door and I needed a key card to open it. This had happened several times by this point, so naturally I assumed that I needed to scour the room to locate it, and after 10 minutes of searching to no avail, I finally found it, about 6 feet from the door I needed to open. Why even lock the door then? The damn key card is right there anyway, what's the point? Except, I know what the point is, it's to slow the player down and pad out the gameplay. That old chestnut. Indeed, a great deal of this game's length comes not from large environments or an incentive to explore, but a deliberate attempt to slow the player down. Clearly, Arcane was trying to craft a sort of believable choose-your-own-adventure style game, and with the level design, they knocked it out of the park, but in terms of their skill trees, they could do with some major adjustments in terms of balance. Ultimately, you have 6 different skill trees to tune to your liking, and with neuromods aplenty, you can craft your character in a multitude of ways. However, unlike games with balanced skill trees, you would be foolish to develop your character from a single category, as skills that are perhaps not required but greatly needed are found spread among multiple categories of this tree, so if you want to stick to the science route or security route, good luck. Have fun banging your head against the wall for the length of this sloppy mess. There are also a lot of alien powers to learn, though I'm struggling to see their usefulness. Each power draws from a limited pool of psi energy and uses a great deal of the meter with each use. Unlocking these powers also requires the use of a lot of neuromods that would probably be better used upping your damage output and health pool, as well as skills that would allow you to more easily move throughout the world. Plus, unlock too many of these powers and the station's automated security measures will turn on you, basically increasing the number of enemies by around 25%. I don't know, maybe they are more useful than first glance would show, but with the huge downsides to unlocking and using them, they seem ultimately pointless to me, and I ended up ignoring them almost entirely, but hey, it's a play as you want kind of game, am I right? Though as much as the game wants you to think that's true, it isn't necessarily the case. For example, I haven't played a good FPS in a while, so I decided for my run I would use my neuromods to level up the security path of my skill tree, opting for a shotgun and pistol combo, but this proved to be a frustrating endeavor even with fully modded weaponry. Clearly the game incentivizes the use of other skills, which ones I'm not entirely sure, but building your character to output as much damage as possible only gets you so far, and I found myself hitting wall after wall and becoming frustrated every time I entered a new area. You know how in some games with skill point distribution systems you can screw your character up if you don't know how to properly distribute those skills? Well, Prey is like that. It isn't so much a play your way experience rather than a play the way we expect you to, or you're gonna have a bad time, and that's a problem, especially since there isn't a way to respec your character, so once a skill is purchased, you're stuck with it, so good luck trying to change your playstyle later in the game. And the Typhon are relentless with how much damage they can output per second, so I found myself at a constant disadvantage to the point where halfway through the game I had to turn the difficulty from normal to easy in order to just scrape by. Well, that's the point I imagine a few of you are saying right now. You're supposed to be at a disadvantage because this is a horror game. But is it? Honestly, after the 23 hours I've played, I can't tell you what kind of game this is supposed to be. At times it feels as though it's supposed to be a science fiction FPS along the lines of Half-Life or Unreal, but at others it feels more like a Fallout-style RPG, complete with side quests, critical hit counters, and the like. Or maybe it's a stealth game like Arcane's own Dishonored, but ultimately it just feels as if the game is trying to do so much that it ends up taking only surface elements of different genres and never settles into anything worthwhile. On the surface, Prey is most reminiscent of System Shock 2, a game that I've tried multiple times to get into, but haven't broken through the wall yet, but with the neuromods and the way in which you communicate with other survivors, it plays out a lot more like BioShock in space, only with none of the philosophical insights or subtlety. At times the game comes close to stepping into the realm of moral questions and thought-provoking musings, but then it will almost instantly drop the ball in favor of skimming the surface of some other random thought. Characters, primarily January, muse on the topic of death and morality, prodding the player in the ribs and asking if the action they just took or one they are about to take was moral or not. However, the game never provides an argument to go with these thoughts, instead choosing to end every one of these instances with the epistemological questions of what is morality, what is humanity, what is life.
What are cows?
And this game has no sense of subtlety, which is most apparent in regard to its sound design, which is beyond abysmal. The music is decent, though it doesn't fit very often, but I could forgive that if it wasn't too busy making my ears bleed with how loud it is compared to everything else that's going on. I had to crank the music all the way down in the options menu just to make it tolerable, and it's still way too loud compared to the volume of the sound effects and dialogue. But the worst part of the sound design is that it never lets the environment speak for itself, and instead has to be all up in your face, banging you over the head to make damn sure you get what's going on. If a mimic transforms nearby, you'll hear a grating, spooky sound effect that won't let up until the little bastard is dead, and because they usually come in multiples, you can be assured that you'll hear this obnoxious noise constantly. Then there are times when there are no enemies around and the spooky sound effects will start to play for no reason, and then suddenly the game will go quiet for a moment before playing a soothing guitar riff with no prompt as to why. Characters will talk to you from across the room and sound as if they're speaking directly into your ear hole, and you'll have to walk pretty far away from them before their volume drops even slightly. Guess the sound designers haven't ever heard of the inverse square law, which states that every time a distance is doubled between the listener and the source, the perceived loudness is dropped by 6 decibels. There you go, nerd fact for the day. But it isn't just the sound design that lacks subtlety, but the dialogue and writing as well. Characters often repeat themselves between sentences, and other characters, primarily January, will repeat what someone just said or something you only moments ago read ad nauseum. For example, one time I found a transcribe that once listened to told me exactly what I needed to do in order to proceed, and I was like, okay, I'll go do that. And upon taking a few steps in the direction I needed to go, January calls me up to instruct me on that very thing I was about to do. And she does this all the time. Probably should have just named her Fee or Navi with the amount of help that she's actually providing me. That said, Prey does have a few things going for it that prevents it from being a complete wash. The previously mentioned level design and unique look really need to be seen within the context of the game to truly be appreciated. The gameplay, while all over the place in terms of its execution, did have me enjoying myself at several moments as I used my wits to traverse this unique world. Piecing together the mystery surrounding Talos 1 and trying to figure out if the course of action I'm taking is right or wrong was truly engaging, as was piecing together the lives of the engineers, scientists, and crew members aboard the vessel. And there were even moments of giddiness as I gleefully used my glue gun to create a set of stairs for the first time, or threw a recycling charger into a room full of mimics, taking them out and darting in to collect the exotic crafting material they left behind. And speaking of crafting, can we please make it a rule that if you're going to have a crafting system, it needs to function like the one in this game? Collect a bunch of junk and recycle it into 4 different types of materials and craft items from just those base components rather than having to seek out bits of old tire and aluminum foil to craft grandma's golden butt plug or whatever. Count me in. Usually I hate crafting systems, but this one I actually liked, as I joyously 3D printed 300 shotgun shells and said fuck you to Resident Evil 7's bullshitty small inventory. I'm of two minds when it comes to this game. On the one hand, what it does well, it does really well, but on the other, what it does poorly can easily tarnish the overall experience. Prey isn't a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a sloppy one. There are a lot of unique ideas at work here and some enjoyment to be had, but beyond that, the off-putting sound design, the stop-and-go gameplay, and the unbalanced leveling system leaves us with an incredibly flawed but interesting title.